Good afternoon. Today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about myths of gifted education. There are many myths around gifted learners, and today we're going to look at three of these, which are that gifted students achieve well at everything, that gifted students don't need help, they'll do fine on their own, and that gifted students are a homogenous group. Before we start looking at these myths, I'd like you to take a moment to think about gifted students alike, and if you can quickly describe on the piece of paper in front of you characteristics that come to mind, what they look like, how they behave, how you would perceive them, and if there's any gifted students in your class, who are they and what are their behaviours and characteristics like. I'll give you a minute to do that, and then we're going to share with the person next to us, and then I'll get you to share with the whole group. Okay, so myths that are believed in tend to become true. Where have these myths come from? It's important that we acknowledge if the myths are true or if in fact they've come from outdated research and historical views that maybe still influence how we perceive things and what our perspectives and beliefs are around these myths. And it's important to remember that often myths may not be accurate, and that sometimes we've heard them so much that we don't question whether they're facts or true statements, and rather we just believe them to be true. I think that as educators, it's important that we read the research, and especially current research. And as well as this, we need to question what our current beliefs are and whether those beliefs have stemmed from factual information and from actual evidence of gifted learners, or if it's, again, just a myth that over time we've started to believe as being true and accurate. And again, it's extremely important that we acknowledge that our gifted learners have special needs and that they're not a one-fits-all approach, and we need to change that mindset. And that gifted students have very unique needs, and we need to obtain a clear understanding of these students so that we can address and serve these needs appropriately. So think about it in terms of, if it was your child, how would you want their needs to be met? So the myths have emerged over time, and they're from a range of different reasons, but usually it's due to a lack of teacher training and knowledge around the area of gifted education, and just we need to just become more aware. It's also general assumptions that have been built up over time, and then that forms stereotypes. And normally when we think of a gifted learner, I think most people probably think of those gifted achievers, whereas there's quite a few different groups. As well, sometimes schools have a one-dimensional gifted program which looks at catering for a whole group of gifted learners rather than the individuals. Myth that gifted students achieve well at everything. This myth makes you believe that if a child is gifted academically in one area, say for example reading, then they should be gifted in all academic areas, so spelling and writing, math, science, etc. This can cause a lot of negative issues for the gifted student, such as depression and anxiety and a sense of failure and self-doubt. That we acknowledge that the reality is that very few are actually very good in everything that they do, and that we can't assume that they'll be gifted in all areas. Often we look at high performance as a marker for giftedness, and many gifted students don't actually perform at the highest level, or especially all the time. Often teachers might say, well, that child can't be gifted because they can't tie their shoes, or they don't get straight A's in everything, or that they spell so poorly. But that's not a reflection on their gifts, because they may not be gifted in those particular areas, but in others. That we have a common idea of what giftedness means. So I'm going to look at Gagne's definition, where he talks about gifts as, or giftedness as, having outstanding natural abilities in at least one area, and compared to your same age peers, that you're in the top 10%. And talent is when those gifts have been mastered, and again, in that, at least that one area, and in the top 10% compared to your age peers. And Gagne's differentiated model of giftedness and talent looks at gifts in 6 areas. They can be intellectual, creative, social, perceptual, muscular, and motor control. And Gagne believes that these gifts are transformed through the developmental process into outstanding competencies of knowledge and skills, which is our talents, and that there are 2 main areas of catalysts that are constantly affecting that development process, and in a negative or a positive way. And these are environmental and individual or intrapersonal factors. And that the role of chance also plays a part in whether those gifts will develop into talents. And chance can be what family you're born into, your background or culture, and the type of schooling and education you've received. So as you can see, Gagne's model here shows that you don't have to be gifted in each of those domains in order to be gifted, that you can be gifted in at least just one of those. Mozart was not the world's most gifted scientist, as Newton was not remembered for his musical accomplishments, and that just ties in with that idea. If we quickly look at this case study of William, who's a 7-year-old boy in year 2, I've listed here his strengths and his areas of weakness and his behaviours. And I'm just going to ask you if you can have a quick look at it and then consider what domains his strengths or gifts are in, according to Gagne. And if we were believing in the myth that gifted students are good at everything, then how does that influence a student such as William in a regular classroom environment? So I'll get you to share that in a moment. So as teachers, our part of the deal is that we must help our gifted students develop their natural potential or gifts into talents by providing them with appropriate curriculum and educational opportunities. So gifted students don't need help, they'll do fine on their own is the next myth we're going to look at. There's many issues or reasons as to why this myth has come about, and generally it's attitudes that often people have and the stereotypes of gifted students, that they're engaged and they're high achieving, gifted in all areas, self-motivated, articulate, that they'll do well regardless of the quality of education that they receive, and that often teachers won't give more challenging work until the set classroom work has been completed. And that's something that we need to change as a group. So another reason that this myth has come about is that people often focus on the gifted student as being that one that's successful or the autonomous learner. But there are other gifted types, and they are such as the divergently gifted, the underground gifted, the dropouts, and the twice exceptional or double labelled gifted child. So it's important to be aware of the many types of gifted students. So reality is, would you send a star athlete to train for the Olympics without a coach? Well, no, we wouldn't. And like often We'll provide our gifted sporting and musical students with specialist training and programs and faster paced learning, but we don't do that for our gifted learners. And often I think it's due to this idea of elitism and that tall poppy syndrome, that they'll think that they're better than others if we provide them with those opportunities. It's so important that we don't expect our gifted learners to thrive and develop in the regular classroom without specialist support and specific programs so they can reach their potential. If we don't identify and nurture and challenge these children, then they're going to be disengaged and bored, frustrated. They may mask their abilities so that they can fit in. And then this leads to underachievement, poor grades, acting out, behaviour issues, poor work habits when they're actually challenged because they've never developed those, plus many other things as well. So we as teachers and parents as well need to help these students feel secure and understood and supported and connected so that they are reaching their potential. So there are many factors, and these are a few that influence why they may need help. They could be twice exceptional, they could be underachieving, be poor test takers, hide their abilities, and be asynchronous. So underachievement. There are many factors or reasons why students underachieve, such as they may have a lack of a challenging curriculum, they self-handicap, where they mask their ability so they can fit in socially with their same age peers. They may be perfectionists or be twice exceptional and have a co-occurring disability. They may have a low self-esteem or be unmotivated due to many factors. They might have family or socioeconomic reasons why they're not achieving. So achievement is the discrepancy that exists between a child's performance and their ability. And it's usually the main reason why they don't perform in class. And we can't, as teachers, assume that if they work harder or become more conscientious that they're going to achieve. And we also can't expect them to reach consistently high scores in everything, as that pressure can be really damaging psychologically and emotionally and socially. It's important as well that we look at Gagne's areas of or catalysts of individual and environmental reasons for underachieving so that we can then address these problems. So I mentioned before motivation. Motivation is key to underachievement. If they're motivated and they're given student-led, interest-based, independent type research projects to allow their gifts or areas to develop, then their motivation is going to increase and their drive and effort and persistence all will be positive. It's really important with our anxious kids, our anxious students, that they especially can be affected by underachievement. And when the work gets harder, they start to cave in because they don't have that self-esteem or confidence to be able to tackle that harder work, even though they can. So if you have a look at this quote, half of all gifted students do not perform to their ability. That 10 to 20% of our dropouts are gifted, and 15 to 40% are at risk of significant underachievement. And that's both alarming and terrifying to think about, and why this is such a crucial area that we need to pursue. So very quickly, I'd like you to think about what the negative impacts of believing in this myth are. And if you can just share your ideas in groups of 3 or 4, and then I'll have some of you share with the whole class. Okay, so as with all students, gifted students need guidance and instruction from us. They need support and they need tolerance from teachers, and especially they need a challenging curriculum. And we need to be trained so that we are able to best help them reach their potential. And our role is crucial for being able to spot and nurture their talents in a school setting. And again, via teacher training and awareness, we can do this. The next myth I'm looking at is that gifted students are a homogenous group. Look, they're all different, okay? That they're as different as from each other as they are from other gifted students and other non-gifted students for many, many reasons. They often are grouped together in a school-based program for gifted students, and they are treated as a collective group and not as individuals for their area of strength. And this is something that we need to actually think quite a lot about when we're setting up programs in our school for these learners. The reality is that they are not a single homogenous group of learners. There are many, many ways that they differ from each other, and these are in their domains or areas of gifts, their personality, their levels of giftedness, their characteristics, their talents, their learning styles, interests, and so on. There are many factors as to why they're different. They could be twice exceptional or underachieving. Again, their level of giftedness. They may be poor test takers, or they may be they're asynchronous in their development. So, just looking at this slide on levels of giftedness, there are huge differences in giftedness, and the more gifted you are, the more extreme your needs will be. Mild giftedness is roughly 1 in 10, so maybe there might be 3 in a class of 30. The moderately gifted student, there may be 1 or 2 in a year group. The highly gifted, there's 1 in 1,000 to 1 in 10,000 students, so possibly 1 in a school. And then your exceptionally gifted students, 1 in 10,000 to 1 in a million students. So it's quite unlikely that you're going to come across one of these in your teaching careers. But it's important to factor in that gifted learners vary in their degree of giftedness as well. In that they could be twice exceptional, where they have a co-occurring disability as well as being gifted, and that often this disability may mask or hide their ability, and they can then appear average in the classroom and often then go undetected. They may be getting learning support or remedial support for their learning disability. So it's important that we consider these children that are in our learning support groups, that they in fact may actually be gifted as well. It's important to always focus on their strengths and their gifts rather than just helping their disability. And examples of twice exceptional students are those with autism, dyslexia, physical disabilities, ADD, ADHD, sensory processing disorder, and learning disabilities, to name a few. And another way that they can be different from each other is that they are asynchronous, and where and that's actually a hallmark of gifted children, is they're asynchronous in their development, where we're dealing with many different ages at once. So, for example, we could have an 8-year-old boy who is emotionally mature, has an emotional maturity of a 6-year-old, but the intellectual level of a 12-year-old. So we're dealing with many ages at one time. And for these gifted students, it's important that we design a strengths-based program rather than, like I said, focusing on their areas of weakness. Now, quickly, I want you to take a look at what we've been talking about today and take a moment to think about the students in your class who may be gifted that you may not have considered. Underachievers, those twice exceptional students, those that are just a little bit different, quirky, they think outside the box, not achieving at the top. I want you to now make a list of these students in your class that come to mind, and then compare this list to the one in your first activity and see if there's any new students that pop up. As teachers, we need to keep these students switched on. You know, their extraordinary level of potential needs to be fostered, and we need to make sure it doesn't go to waste. We also must teach them in very different ways from each other. So we need multiple plans or strategies in place, and we must design programs based on their area of giftedness, and treat them as though they were our child and how we would want their needs to be catered for. And we must provide specifically appropriate education to meet their unique learning needs. And most importantly, not to let them slip through the cracks in our educational system. And keeping in mind when we are teaching these wonderful students that they, if challenged appropriately, are Australia's most valuable future resource. Thank you so much for listening.